You're listening to the Visionary Lifestyle Podcast, the show that's dedicated to raising consciousness and empowering you to activate your highest potential. I'm your host, Magda Freedom Rod. Greetings, Rainbow Warriors. I'm still in the middle of a forest in France and ready for you to join me here in this Widerness Wellness Experience through June 23rd, anytime it's convenient for you, for as few or as many days as you wish. We're in a 300-year-old eco-lodge and spa in the forest, surrounded by pristine nature, and I'm teaching yoga here twice a day. Check out the show notes on my Visionary Lifestyle and Podcast Facebook page for details on that. I hope to see you here. So, without further ado, our guest today is one of my sheros, the one and only Seane Corn. Seane is an internationally celebrated yoga teacher known for her impassioned activism, unique self-expression, and inspirational style of teaching. As a leading voice of yoga and social change, Seane has been featured in countless media platforms across the globe. She has been seen on the cover of over 30 magazines and utilizes her national platform to bring awareness to global humanitarian issues. In 2005, she was named National Yoga Ambassador by Youth AIDS, and in 2013 was given the Global Green International Environmental Leadership Award. Since 2007, she has been training leaders of activism through her co-founded organization, Off the Mat into the World. Seane has spent time in the U.S., India, Cambodia, Haiti, and Africa working with communities in need, teaching yoga, providing support for child labor, and educating people about HIV/AIDS prevention. Seane is also co-founder of the Save a Challenge humanitarian tours, which have raised roughly $4 million since 2007, getting the yoga community involved in fund and awareness-raising efforts across the globe. Her self-authored DVDs are available through Gayam and Yoga Journal, as well as her most recent groundbreaking 3-DVD set, The Yoga of Awakening, through Sounds True. She is currently working on her first book. I'm so excited to bring you this interview with one of my biggest sheros. I met Seane back in 2011 when I invited her to join me teaching yoga in Los Angeles on 11/11/11 during the Occupy protest on the lawn at City Hall. She showed up in spades on that day, bringing her whole tribe from Off the Mat into the world, as well as organizing all the top yoga teachers in LA to join us. It was a phenomenal day that I'll never forget. Make sure to check out the show notes for pics of that. I've interviewed Seane several times for different publications over the years because she stands so firmly for all the things I deeply care about. She is Karma Yoga in action. She is a huge role model for me and so many others. We recorded this interview last year in New York City at the United Nations on International Yoga Day, where Seane was teaching a class to celebrate the occasion, with all my Rishikesh yoga tribe on site too. It was a truly spectacular day to be a yogi. And guys, we're almost at that time again. The summer solstice, June 21st, will be the 4th International Day of Yoga. I'll be teaching in France and would love, love, love for you to join me here to celebrate that and join a worldwide group of people who recognize the tremendous benefits of yoga. Seane and I deep dive here into what it means to be a yogi. I love this conversation, and I just know you'll find lots of inspiration in it too. Remember to check out the show notes on visionary-lifestyle.com/podcast for links to Seane and things we talk about during the interview. Enjoy and namaste. Seane Corn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in New York City with you.
Yay!
After all these years.
Yeah, I know. It's been 6 years since we actually met the first time at Occupy. We go way back. Our activist roots were connected way back then.
Yeah, we did some fun stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that was a beautiful time. Maybe I can include in the show notes some pictures to the photo albums of the yoga that we did at the City Hall in Los Angeles. But today, we're here celebrating International Day of Yoga in New York City at the UN, and you're teaching.
I'm teaching. It's an honor. It's really cool. I mean, the fact that there's this day where across the entire world people are acknowledging the power of yoga and the impact that it has on emotional, physical, psychological, and spiritual health and wellness is really quite phenomenal. And I'm very proud to be able to be here with Swamiji and Jagtal and Sharon Gannon from Jivamukti and Prince E.A. And I have a feeling a whole slew of people who are going to be showing up and doing their thing. And so it should be a pretty extraordinary event.
Yeah, it's a big honor to be here and be sharing it with all of you as well. And I love that you and I have the history and we go back and we can sit here today and have this conversation. So the value of yoga for the individual and for humanity is just so massive, right? Mm-hmm. You and I know this. And what an incredible thing that the UN, overwhelmingly approved it to be an international day. So people all over the world are celebrating and practicing, not just today, but it's officially tomorrow. But here in New York, we're celebrating today and tomorrow. So yes, we know the value of yoga. What does it mean to be a yogi to you?
For me, to be a yogi means to be in relationship with all beings, all things, and that includes the planet, the animals, each other, ourselves, our relationship with God, that there's no separation, that everything is connected and interdependent. And so as a yogi, I have to really look at what that means and take accountability for the way in which I participate in that union and also for the ways in which I don't. And in the ways in which I don't, change it by using the tools of yoga to be able to take a certain amount of responsibility to move me in the direction of wholeness. And so that's what yoga is to me. It's about relationships.
Yeah, with self and with others.
And the planet and animals and God.
Yeah, all of the above. Right, it's union, of all of these things. Beautiful. And one thing that I really appreciate so much about your teaching style is you're a great teacher for the asana, of course, but beyond that is the karma yoga that you teach, which is something that I always really want to shine a light on for people about what karma yoga really means, why it's valuable for the world. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I hear this a lot about my particular contribution to the communities of yoga, and when people will reflect upon my commitment to service. And it's always been a very organic, a natural progression in my practice. The first years, my practice was about my health, my body, my state of being. And then there was a shift that it moved from the individual to the collective, where that idea of me became more about the we, and there was no separation of it. And it was just one of those I see where this is going. And it's the practice of yoga prepared the vessel to help me to confront some of my own emotional and psychological limited beliefs that were keeping me disconnected really from myself. And once that was, I wouldn't say eradicated, because I'm certainly not enlightened, but I'm empowered enough to be able to acknowledge both the shadow parts of myself and the light parts of myself. And when I was able to be in communion with those two sides, it helped me to look outside of myself and see others and really bear witness to their own humanity and not judge it, recognize just like myself that they're on their own path, that they're also here to awaken to what love is. The way in which that happens is between each soul and the God of their understanding. And if there's any judgment within me, then the separation is also within me. And so karma yoga really became this natural, it was very fluid. Like vinyasa is very fluid. It's like one thing eventually leads into another, and karma exposed itself to me when I was really ready. Now, I had been doing service work and activism work, more activism than actual service, for years, ever since I was a teenager, related to issues, gay rights, AIDS awareness, and health advocacy issues. So these are things I was very passionate about, but it wasn't integrated with yoga. I was an angry activist. I was an activist that didn't have tools for self-regulation, and a lot of my own unhealed wounds were what motivated my activism. And because of my own issues around injustice, it became essentially important for me to confront injustice, but from a deep, if I look back at it now, it was deeply invested in being against something rather than for something. It was needing to be right. It was meeting really fear with fear, anger with anger. And the yoga practice, as I moved through the physical practice and began to release some of those deep tensions that were causing me to be so contractive and therefore reactive, the yoga practice let me feel, let me connect to my vulnerability, and help me to respond to conflict and crisis in a very different way. So my activism matured, and my desire to be of service also became a very, like I said, an organic extension of my yoga mat. And so it feels, for me, nothing necessarily extraordinary, nothing outside of the realm of yoga. It's just, as a yoga student, for me, this was its natural evolution, and I just have moved into it. I don't know what comes next, but I know that right now in my life, I can't just do my yoga on the mats. It has to be really out in the community, out in the world. It has to be in relationship to anything that is causing separation, anything that is causing the oppression of others is where I feel yoga is most needed, and therefore it's where I need to be.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you said so many things that resonate really deeply with me. One thing I talk about a lot is the notion of us, with the conscious eating education that I do, the notion of moving from me consciousness to we consciousness, which is exactly what you just said, and how yoga is just a path that naturally leads us there, because it helps us to become more whole and complete within ourselves, so we are more out of pain and more in balance, right? So that we can be of service to others rather than just licking our own wounds all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So well, before we get to that, there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Where do I go? Off the mat into the world is what you started, right? And you collected other yogis to come and partner with you on this mission, right? So can you tell us in a nutshell what that organization is?
Sure. Well, Off the Mat into the World is co-founded by myself, Hala Corey, and Suzanne Sterling. And the reason it's a co-founded organization is because one of the most important things right now is, to me, is a new model of leadership. It's a feminine model of leadership that's horizontal rather than a top-down model where you're sharing power. And that means you're sharing vision and ideas and commitments, and also recognizing the ebb and flow of people's lives. And if someone's got to go feed their kid, then I'm going to get in the car and make the posters. And like, how do we work together and in a more unified way? So Off the Mat was created with that in mind, to model community. And it bridges the gap between yoga, transformational work, activism, and social justice, and trains leaders to be able to use the tools of yoga for more conscious engagement, and so that we can go out into the world and actually relate to other human beings that might have different values, different traumas, different ideas and energies, and still be able to be accountable and responsible in our dialogue and in our actions. Again, without meeting hate with hate and fear with fear. And so first and foremost, Off the Mat is a training program, and it's evolved a lot over the years. We've done a lot of service work. We've raised $4 million, done work in 8 different countries, have done over 23 sustainable projects in these countries. And that was all great and wonderful. But what I think one of the evolutions was, as going into these different countries, even though we were raising great money and going into partnership with with conscious organizations that were already doing great work, there was still a lack, and I can put this on myself, a lack of not just cultural sensitivity, but cultural humility. I still go into these cultures as a white woman, as a woman of privilege, as a woman with a certain amount of education. There's a certain bias and prejudice and discrimination that is embedded within my body based on my education, my religion, my own culture. And I bring all of that in with me, and even with the best of intentions, I started to realize that what we really needed to do was to do more listening. And that's what we're doing now. We're doing more tours that are called learning and listening tours. We went to Cuba last year. This year, actually in July coming up, we're going to South Dakota to work with the Lakota tribe. They're our tour company, and they're all Standing Rock activists, and we're going to learn about the Native American and the U.S. genocide and the impact that genocide had on the culture and myths and traditions and art and on and on. And so we're doing a lot of that kind of work now. We're broadening our faculty to bring in classes around racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, ageism, power and privilege, called Beyond Duality. And trying to expand within the yoga community our understanding of what oppression is around power and privilege, and the ways in which, if we're not actively doing whatever we can to end or destabilize in some capacity these systems of power, then we're complicit. And many of us benefit from the oppression of others. We participate in it in the unconscious every single day. And if we really want to be a true yogi, we have to take accountability for the ways we participate, take accountability for the ways in which we benefit, and end the complicity by conscious engagement and allyship. And that's what Off the Mat helps to provide, educational opportunities as well as projects for engagement.
Wow, fantastic. I love that you're moving into that space with Standing Rock, and I love the whole idea of listening and giving these people, an ear, and what do they need, right? Like, what has been the result of, our actions against you, and how has that impacted you? And then also, how can we fix it, right?
Yes.
What can be done, if anything? At the very least, we're coming with compassion, compassionate listening, and, hearing you and letting your story be told. But then I assume there are action steps that follow that, right? That come through those conversations. So that's super powerful work that the world really needs. So thank you for standing up and doing that. So then moving into, a lot of the education that I do too is about aligning, your actions with your values, right? And so the food piece is something I've been really passionate about. And I know that you eat a plant-based diet.
Yes.
And I would love to get behind your reasons for that and what that means to you.
Sure. As a student of yoga, I can't personally justify. There is no part of me that can reconcile eating or wearing animals when the main tenets of yoga is do no harm. And so my health, my wellness is not more important than anyone else's health, wellness, or survival. And that means I have to just be less lazy in the ways in which I nourish myself, be more conscientious about what's available in the world that doesn't take the life of an animal. And it's all available, it just takes a little bit more work because we're not accustomed to it. This interest of mine started very early. I'm 50 years old now, and I was a vegetarian when I turned around 18, 19, and it was really because, I worked here in New York City at Life Cafe, which was owned by David Life, and Sharon Gannon was a waitress there who went on to open up Jivamukti, and they're major animal right activists. And so I worked there for 5 years and heard a lot of rhetoric at that time around animal rights. And I remember getting annoyed by it because in my mind, I had no association with bacon and pig, or McNuggets and chicken, or burger and cow.
Right, totally disassociated.
Very much so. And it annoyed me when people would impose their beliefs, because of course I would say, well, where am I going to get my protein from? I was very limited, and again, I was only 18 years old. But what happened to me was I was flipping through a book. It was called America by a photographer, I think Richard Avedon. Richard Avedon. It's a black and white photograph book of portraits of American workers, across really the heartland. And I'm casually flipping through this book, and I stop at a page that just startled me and caught my eye. And what it was I'm assuming it was a boy wearing overalls, and he had taken the freshly cut head of a cow and put it over his own like it was a mask. And the cow's tongue was hanging out and its eyes were open. And I stopped on this page, and something about the juxtaposition of the cow's head on top of a human body. And there was blood dripping from the neck onto the body of this boy. And there was something so heinous about it. And I realized that if that was a true human, that a picture that I was looking at of a human being with their tongue out, eyes open, blood pouring down them, I would be outraged, and I would do everything in my power to end whatever injustice that was. And yet I had never associated the animal to having having relationships or love or family or feelings, that I could see in the expression that whatever went down, that animal felt true pain and absolute terror. And that was it for me. And I put that book down, and I gave up red meat. That was the first thing that I gave up. And as I got more into yoga at that time, because I got into yoga around the same time frame, I gave up chicken and then fish, and then eventually leather went. And the last thing to go for me was cheese. There was always an excuse of like, it took a really long time, not a really long time actually, but it took a while for kind of me to detox, not just the physical addiction that I had, not so much to the meat. My addiction to the meat or to the cheese was more psychological. My addiction to the food had more to do with the chemicals. And when I was able to figure that out and detox from some of the chemicals that I was addicted to, and then heal, like really start to fine tune around the psychological element, meaning that I grew up in a Polish family, and the kind of foods that, like when you're sad, or growing up, if I was sad, there was always going to be a plate of pierogies with applesauce and sour cream, like waiting for me, fried in butter. I have a psychological association to those pierogies and the sour cream and the butter that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
And when I started to realize that there were certain foods that I had a psychological attachment to, and learn to meet my emotional needs elsewhere, then I was able to eliminate those foods. And so it took some time, but I've been vegan now for a really long time. And I like to think that I'm a really good example of someone who is a vegan. Like at 50 years old, my muscle tone is great. I don't walk around the world fatigued. Hormonally, I'm all good to go. Like, it's just a matter of getting educated and figuring out how to give your body the nutrients that it needs, but in a plant-based way.
Right.
And it just takes a little bit more effort. But once you get the swing of it, it's just like anything else. It just becomes a habit.
Right, it's a learning curve. There's a learning curve to it, but once you get there, like you said, it becomes a habit, and that's beautiful. So that your initial inspiration was the animal rights.
Yes.
You had the compassion for the animals and the suffering.
But it also, as an activist, I can't justify eating meat and then say I care about the environment. I just can't. Not when I know about the amount of rainforest that gets cut down to create fields, to grow the grain, to feed the cattle. And if they were cutting down that rainforest to grow the grain to feed our global population who are starving and in poverty, maybe I would have a different relationship to it. But they're using it to feed the cattle. And when I think about the amount of water that it makes to produce beef, when I think about the amount of methane that's being released into our environment, and that the production, the slaughter, the taking care of the animals that are farmed throughout the United States, throughout the world, is one of the leading causes of greenhouse effects today. So again, it's not just a matter of being an animal rights activist, which I am, but I'm also an environmentalist. And so to me, it's one of those no-brainers. If I'm going to be an environmentalist, give up meat.
Right, right. Because it's actually, by my research, the largest contributor to greenhouse gases, the number one contributor to climate change, which is the biggest threat to the human species. So as I see it at this point, us eating animals is suicidal, and there's a lot of people that are conditioned to thinking that they need animal protein to be healthy. So there's a lot of education that has to be done to help people understand that you can actually get your nutritional needs from the plant kingdom.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. So,
and there's other nutrients. Like every single day I drink this hardcore, like superfood drink, making sure that I get my nutrients. I take these 5 amino acid protein pills. It gives me all the protein I need for a single day, and it's plant-based, and so I have no excuse. So I just make sure, it's like, okay, if I'm concerned I'm not going to find it in my plants, I made sure there were supplements that were available to me that give me what I need, and then I'm free throughout the day to be creative and to have fun with it. But if that was my concern, and it was, as someone who travels as much as I do, I need to make sure that I keep my nutrients high. Then I'm gonna find a drink that gives that to me. And every single day I have it.
Yeah, and you're on the go. You're nonstop, right? I mean, you're
I'm
traveling
nonstop.
Constantly. You're working constantly. Your output is incredible, and clearly you're very vibrant and healthy. So
thank you.
You're a living example.
Thank you.
that it can work.
But it's being conscientious and being mindful about it, and looking at. I try to do a detox every single year, to make sure that whatever environmental stressors are in the world are getting out of my body, because I want my organs to operate optimally. If they are, If I'm eating foods with a lot of gluten in it, it's just going to line around inside my intestines. That means that any good foods that are coming through, the nutrients can't get through those little hairs on the inside of the intestines, the villi, the villi. And so I'll always be hungry, even though I might be eating, if my organs aren't operating optimally. And so it's something else I take into consideration. I make sure that I'm detoxing. I make sure that I'm getting fiber. And again, it's a little bit more thought, but I'd rather do that than live my life completely unconsciously and, again, not understand the impact that those McNuggets are having on my physical body, on the planet, and on the animals.
Right. Perfect. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're so on the same page about this. One thing that I'm always striving to get people to do is make the connection. Like, I like to use that as a hashtag, make the connection. The food choice that you're making is so powerful. If you research the true cost of it on your own body, on the animals, on the planet. I mean, when you switch completely to a plant-based diet, it's just a win-win-win. Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
The animals win, the planet wins, and we don't need the animal protein and the animal products. So I'm glad that we're aligned in that. And I really want to reach the yoga community with this message, because as I say, I mean, the conscious eating work that I do is about aligning your food choices with your values. And as yogis, as we're doing the physical practice, you can't help but slowly but surely wake up and become more conscious and move more into union, right? So I really want to see the yoga community moving more in this direction and helping them understand those connections. And you're a great vehicle for that. So
thank you. One of the workshops that I teach is called Detox Flow. And it's really geared towards the mainstream yogi. They love that title because for a lot of people, they make that association between detoxing and losing weight. One of the first things I say that this is nothing to do with losing weight at all. It's the idea of detoxing is creating optimal health, and optimal health means experiencing the fullness of life, body, mind, and spirit. So in any way that we're not experiencing the fullness of life, we have to be able to recognize it, identify it, and then let it go. And that includes our dietary choices. It includes our environmental choices and participation, but it also looks at our psychological attachments. The idea it's not what you're eating, but what's eating you. That also needs to be taken into consideration. And the impact that our resentment has on our energy body and how to begin to heal that. Because often when we don't feel good, we'll use food or sex or drugs or alcohol or cigarettes to change the way in which we feel, to numb out or dissociate. And so with detox, it's cleansing the physical body, preparing that container to be able to reframe our narratives and purify not only our body but our minds. And in that, of course, is the conversation of veganism. So it's like going through the back door, to get people engaged in that conversation.
Which we have to do sometimes, because if you say, hey, come to this vegan lecture, people probably won't show up, right?
I've experienced that.
So, we're getting in whatever way we can to kind of get the message through, which is great. You touched on energy, which I think is another thing, an aspect to look at, especially from the yogic perspective, understanding that everything is vibration and everything is energy. So when we're consuming animals that have been slaughtered, what are your thoughts about what that does to our energetic body?
Well, huge. It's the work I do is a lot of trauma-informed yoga, which is really looking at energy and what happens when we experience trauma. Trauma is defined as anything that overwhelms your capacity to cope and leaves you feeling helpless, hopeless, or out of control. When we experience trauma, and this isn't just in human beings, this is in all beings, chemicals get released from the brain, they go into the body contracts. You go into fight, flight, freeze, or collapse. And if as a child you've experienced traumas like divorce, death of a loved one, bullying, if you're raised in an environment where your parents give you an opportunity to yell, scream, cry, express, you're able to discharge the energy. If you don't discharge the energy, this energy stays in your cells. In the same way, the health of a cell is dependent upon three things: the quality of the nutrients that you take in, the cell's ability to assimilate those nutrients, and then the cell's ability to effectively release it. You can just shift that word nutrients with emotions. So the health of a cell is dependent upon the quality of the emotions, the ability to assimilate those emotions, and then letting the energy of those emotions go. So if we don't, and love is an energy, it's a vibration, so is happiness, so is joy, but so is shame, rage, guilt, grief, terror, fear, on jealousy, that energy stays suppressed on a cellular level, and it becomes the tension we experience. Tension, stress, and anxiety are the number one causes of illness and depression today. When an animal is led to slaughter, they experience unimaginable trauma. When an animal is caged and cannot move, when an animal is engorged, when an animal's baby is taken away from them, when an animal is resorting to killing its own species to try to just survive. This is all trauma. When it gets its throat cut or electrocuted and stunned, there are experiences that animal is happening that are unimaginable, that are aligned with torture. This is all trauma. That means that there are chemicals being released from that animal's brain. It's going directly into their muscles, into their body, and that becomes the thing in which we ingest. I am so not interested in taking in the terror, the fear, the pain, the suffering that lives within the muscular tissue of that animal. And because I am a big believer in the exchange of energy, I only want what goes into my body to have the highest pranic count, meaning raw fruits and vegetables, foods that are undercooked. You know, I think it's below 118 degrees. And to make sure that it has the most amount of prana, the most amount of nutrients, and that just has that really positive vibration. And animals don't have that. And there's no such thing as a humane slaughter. There's no such thing as free range. None of that is true. None of that is real.
It's an oxymoron.
Yes, it is.
Slaughter.
And it's also semantics. You know, I've gone to, if they can have a huge, gigantic barn filled with countless chickens, and if they just have a tiny little window with a screen and air is coming through, that is technically free range.
Right.
I think there's actually another term for that. But it's not to these animals.
Cage free.
Cage free. Yeah, cage free. These are the kinds of things that I think that people get seduced by very clever marketing.
Yeah.
But if people take the time to go and do some research, look into organizations who are doing great work. I have a great friend in northern New Jersey. He owns Skyland Animal Sanctuary, and you can go on any Saturday and Sunday, and he's an animal rescuer. His farm is all filled with cows and goats and sheep and pigs. There's sheep there too. And chickens, all who have been rescued. He'll tell you the story of every single animal. And this is someone I've known since I was a little girl. And he is one of the most articulate advocates for animal rights and for veganism. And so if anyone's on the East Coast, go up to Watchung, New Jersey, and go see Mike's store and learn more and actually go in there. And once you're educated, it's very hard to look at the animal in the same way.
Yeah.
It's very hard to want to put it in your body. It's equally almost impossible to then want to feed it to your children.
Right. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So switching gears, I just know we have just a few minutes left because you're about to go teach.
Yay.
But I want to know what you're working on. Let's tell the people what you're working on. You just released a whole video set, and you've got a book in the works. Yep. Tell us what's coming up.
Well, I just finished the Yoga for Awakening, which is it's the Yoga of Awakening. Forgot my own DVD series. It's a 3 DVD. It's my opus. It's 30 hours of content, 15 hours of lecture, 15 hours of asana, storytelling. It's very in-depth. I'm very proud of it. I worked very hard on trying to do. People would always say, like, where can I get these lectures? Where can I get these prayers? I finally figured, let me just do it.
Yeah.
I did it. And the book does not have a title yet. I'm about 165 pages in, and I've been working on it for about a year and a half. I'm hoping I'll be done with this by January of 2018 and released probably the following year. And it's all I can say is I'm having a very alchemical experience with this. I've realized a lot about myself in this process. And one of the things is, I've always been very transparent and very open. And there's really nothing you can't ask me that I won't answer. I'm just not secretive that way or precious about my life. But in writing this book, I realized how I've controlled my narrative, and meaning that I've been very, in some ways, strategic in what I'll give to the public and what I won't. And this book is not allowing me to do that. The book is for me to really drop into the teaching. There has to be context set, and the context are coming from narratives of my life.
Yeah.
And so I've been watching myself write these stories the way I tell the stories, and then step back and say, no, I got to go deeper. I got to expose more. And so the book is, for me, it's very vulnerable. It's very personal. It's made me incredibly uncomfortable. It's dealing with my trauma from my own life and the impact that the yoga practice has had on my own healing and my relationship with God and spirituality and the guruship that exists within the yoga community, which is very complex, and why I've chosen to be very, very solitary in my own studentship rather than be a part of the systems, and what it means as a woman to really reject the systems, the patriarchy, and try to forge a different kind of a path, yet at the same time maintain the respect for the traditions. And also contemporize it by looking at, we can't change the world unless we're really willing to commit to understanding the nuances of the human experiences as we understand them. So the book exposes a lot of trauma, it asks a lot of questions, and it provides a lot of tools and pathways for personal reconciliation and how to reframe narratives. So I hope it's juicy. I don't know yet. Like I said, there are days where I think I'm really proud, and there are other days where I read it and I think, what am I doing? What the hell is this? And but I'm really in the creative experience right now, and I've never had this experience before. And I've always been very comfortable with words. Not always. I mean, it's a skill I've developed in learning how to be articulate in conversation and as a public speaker and in facilitation. This is a different level of articulation that I've had to. It's a new skill, and so I hope people appreciate it when it comes out, the intention behind it, which is to be as real as I can possibly be.
Yeah, it sounds like it's full of transparency.
It's pretty transparent.
Yeah. And vulnerability, which, in and of itself will inspire people, I'm sure.
I hope
so thank you for being raw and vulnerable and sharing, your inside deep stories with us. I can't wait for it to come out, to read it, to share it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll let you go because we're all going to go do some yoga now together with everybody all around the world. It's so exciting.
Very exciting.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Seane. I really appreciate you and everything that you're doing in the world and on the mat and off. And just thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for answering the call to be here today. I'm so glad you're part of our tribe of activated rainbow warriors. If you found the show in any way empowering or inspiring, I would be so grateful if you would share the show on social media or with friends and family that you think would benefit from these conversations. And also, rate and review the show in iTunes. This is really the very best way to help support the show and help us get noticed by others who are looking for the sort of content that we're sharing. Now notice there are no outside ads playing here. That's because the show is supported by you, the listener. You can become a patron of the show with a small monthly donation by checking out the perks on our Patreon page at patreon.com/visionary lifestyle and signing up there. There's also a one-time donation button on the podcast page of the website if that suits you better. And just so you know, your donations help to cover the necessary out-of-pocket monthly expenses to produce the show, and will also help us grow so we can inspire and educate even more people. And hey tribe, I'd love to hear from you. Visit me at visionary-lifestyle.com and please tell me your comments and questions. I really look forward to connecting with you. I love you. Namaste. Today's episode is brought to you by the Conscious Eating 101 e-course. This is a 6-week online course aimed at empowering you to make food choices that are in alignment with your values. The program is based on ahimsa, also known as non-harm, and helps you make every bite that you take an expression of love, self-love, animal love, and planet love. The course offers 15 lessons and 20 nutritious and delicious recipes and is offered over 6 weeks that you can do at your own pace. It includes lessons like plant-based nutrition, protein, dairy alternatives, the story on sugar, GMOs, label reading, and many more. If you're looking to increase your health and happiness, balance your weight, reduce your footprint on the planet, and align your food choices with your values, or are interested in being part of the solution to huge world problems like climate change, rainforest destruction, and world hunger, then this is the course for you. If this speaks to you, please check out consciouseating101.com today.